All right, folks, welcome. Thank you all for making it out today. My name is Emmett. I'm the announcer today. We're going to be doing a brief 10-minute questions and answers at the end of this discussion. But without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this is Troy Lee, Senior Vault Infrastructure Engineer at Strategic Group. Go ahead and give him a big round of applause.
Thanks, Emmett. Good morning all, and thank you for coming to my presentation. My name is Troy Lee, and I'm here to talk to you about custom wizards, components, and Dashlets in Nagios XI. You can see there I do have my email address, Twitter, and that URL there is a location on the Nagios Exchange that shows all of my projects. Some stuff I won't even talk about here. There's a lot there. You can go and have a look. Before I take you through my presentation, I just thought I'd start off and explain who I am and how I've come here to talk to you today. Who am I? I'm just like you. I'm passionate about IT, and every day I work for a company where I get to make a difference to the value I deliver to our clients. The company I work for is called Strategic Group. As you can tell by my accent, I'm Australian. I spent the last 7 years of my life with Strategic Group. My journey with Strategic Group started by providing on-site support to clients and customizing and creating solutions around that. The last few years have been somewhat different. In 2005, we decided to create a complete server replacement solution that we call Vault. I think the irony with this is that while we called it Vault, the world would soon catch up and call this cloud. And Nagios XI is the monitoring solution we have chosen for Vault. The real value that Nagios brings to Vault is understanding the baseline performance of our environment and then being able to observe that. It's been very handy. Also, getting alerts when the server room temperature is increasing is somewhat handy. Although the Vault journey is exciting in itself, some of us may have said that it was good luck that we came up with the idea. Others would say that we've planned Vault. But in the end, it's how we approach every day thereafter that has helped define us as a company. And it's this approach that I'm excited to contribute to. It's helped define who I am as an engineer and how I approach my work every day. At the beginning of this year, I was awarded one of 8 MVPs for my work for the Nagios community in the year 2011. And last night I was also awarded for this year, which is really great. So that's one of the key reasons why I'm here to talk to you today about all the projects I've created. So why Nagios XI? My journey started out, and I use the word journey a bit because I do see life as a series of journeys. I played with Nagios a couple of months before XI was released, and I could see it was a very powerful monitoring solution. However, it had that Linux component, and I'm a Windows guy, and that was a barrier to me. But it got to me. A few months later, I was still thinking about XI, and it was nagging in my head. Or not XI, but Nagios. So I did what all of us do, and I jumped on Google and Googled Nagios. And Google, in its infinite wisdom, told me that XI had just been released. I love Nagios XI. Why do I love Nagios XI? Because it's a virtual machine. I can download it, and I have a complete monitoring solution all in one that just works off the bat. This is what I believe a virtual appliance should be. Out of all the things you can do with XI, why did I choose to monitor configuration wizards and customize them and create my own? Well, to an administrator that is new to Nagios, there's a lot to learn. For example, all of us here would want to monitor XYZ device in their environment. So you would get on the Nagios Exchange and search for that device, and you'll find a plugin. So you'll get the plugin, and then you have to learn how to test it at the command line. Then you have to learn how to create a command definition. You then learn to add a service definition that uses that command definition. And that's a lot of things for a new administrator to Nagios XI to learn when they're just wanting to get out there and monitor their stuff. So what's the point of all of this? When I learn how to monitor XYZ device in my environment, I can turn around and write a wizard. So for you, that configuration wizard will automate that whole process. And within a couple of mouse clicks, you'll be monitoring that same device in your environment without all the hassles and hours of learning all the ins and outs. This is a summary of the configuration wizards I've written so far. The host creation tool is one that I'm particularly proud of. Not only does it have a few downloads, but also it was the inspiration for the bulk host import wizard that Nagios Enterprises developed themselves. In 2010, the VMware monitoring wizard allowed me to win the Nagios Seed Camp competition, so that was a good one as well. These are all available for download at the Nagios Exchange, and if you have trouble finding them, I'm sure Google will be more than happy to tell you where to go. When I first started out, there was no official documentation for Nagios XI and configuration wizards. So after creating a couple of wizards, I decided to put some notes together and create my own documentation. Some of these are a little bit outdated now, but in particular, the service relationship map is still a very handy document. Also, the Box 293 demonstration wizard is what I'll focus on in this presentation. It's what I call documentation. When you look at the code, it's heavily commented, so anyone looking at it can understand how it all fits together and works as they go through the stages. This is the service relationship map. It's a bit hard to see. It's a massive PDF. The point of it is it shows you how everything's related to each other. You've got your Windows Performance Monitor counter, how that works at the command line, how that command line relates to a command, and how it relates to a service, how actually the configuration file is at the bottom, and this is the steps here in the configuration wizard itself. And even if you aren't writing configuration wizards, if you're new to XI or if you're migrating to XI, this is just a handy visual reference. I created this because I didn't want to forget. It was something that took me a while to understand. I once was new to Nagios, so. So since then, Nagios has released official documentation. They have one for writing custom wizards for XI, and I highly recommend you read this. The Box 293 demonstration wizard it relates to all the documentation that's here. Also, the XI component development has some handy information about accessing the back-end databases. I recommend you read that as well. So let's talk about configuration wizards. Firstly, I'll say a lot of what I'm going to talk about here might seem like programming common sense, but I'm the first to admit that I'm not a real programmer. So a lot of this is my experience and how I've learnt along the way. One of the key concepts I aim for with my configuration wizards is to provide all the help and configuration steps on the first step of the wizard. This means the user doesn't have to go off and find a manual on how to use it. Things like how to configure SNMP on a Windows server. It's those simple things that removes those barriers from people learning how to get in and monitor their devices. All of this information is in hidden divs, so it's not like this information gets in the way every time they run the wizard. They can expand it and collapse it as they feel like. Where possible, you should automate the data collection process. An example of this is in the Nagios Network Switch Router Wizard. It talks to the switch and gets information about the ports, presents a lovely table, and with checkboxes you can select, and it just means that it confirms that the device you've spoken to is answering your requests, and it makes it easy for the user to select things. A bad example was my VMware wizard, where I just didn't do much validation on it. That was one of my very early wizards, and I do plan to revamp that at some stage. It's just on the back burner at the moment. So now I'm going to delve into configuration wizards. So this is the configuration, the configure tab, and from the configure tab you can click the monitoring wizard. This presents you with step 1, and it shows you a list of all the available configuration wizards you can run through. One thing I did want to point out is as we go through the different steps, the step number doesn't directly correlate to the stage number in the PHP code, and I'll show you that as we go through. Why? I'm not entirely sure, but I just wanted you to know because it can get quite confusing if you don't know. So inside each configuration wizard PHP is this args array. And this just gives you the general information about the wizard. This information is used on the step 1, it pulls that information in, and also on the manage config wizards page. Once you click on a wizard on the step 1, it will take you to step 2. But before I talk about step 2, there is a few things to consider. Is this the first time the wizard has been run? If so, we need to define some variables. Or was the user on step 3? If the user was on step 3 and they clicked the back button, then all the information that they provided in step 2 needs to be repopulated because no one likes having to choose their options again. Or did the user provided data on step 2 fail the required error checking processes? If so, it will take you back to step 2. So you want to repopulate that information. For example, someone might have used invalid characters or left a field blank, but some options were selected. So those options they selected were still selected and the field is still blank. So this is step 2. This is the box 293 demonstration wizard. Firstly, you will see what I was talking about with step 2 and config wizard mode, get stage 1 HTML. Those numbers don't correlate, but if you, especially with the box 293 wizard, I make it really clear. It's like a template you can use to create your own wizards. The overview, discount offer, license, and project hours are examples of the expandable, collapsible divs I was talking about. And you can have then inside those sub-expandable, collapsible divs for more information about particular configuration steps. Here you can see we're asking for the IP address or the fully qualified domain name of the host we want to monitor. And also I've got a select option there just for demonstration purposes. So this is still on step 2. This is the first step you can customize. It's completely customizable except for the back and next buttons. As I talked about earlier, you should put all of your configuration overview help steps here. I made the mistake in one of my earlier wizards of putting it on step 3 and the user just didn't know what to do when they first got into the wizard. So experience. Before step 3, we have a validation stage. Firstly, there should be a check to see if the user was on step 4 and they clicked the back button. If they click the back button, if they're on step 3 and they click the back button. If they click the back button, we don't need to validate the data because the data would have already been validated when we proceeded from step 2 through to step 3. Otherwise, the user is proceeding to step 3 and we need to validate the data. For example, the IP address might have invalid characters or the field may have been left blank. If the supplied data is not correct, then how's the wizard going to work? So this is step 3. You can see here that the IP address that I typed in on the first field has continued through. And also between step 2 and step 3, it has done a DNS name lookup and populated that information into the host name field. I mean, you can change that to whatever you want to be, but it just, some people might have their DNS set up exactly how they want, and away they go. So the picture on the left is the network switch router wizard, monitoring wizard I was talking about. You can see this is this lovely table I was talking about where it goes and talks to the switch, gets the information about all the devices and presents them so you can just tick boxes and go on your merry way. Or the Dell Open Manage wizard on the right is just a simple tick box. Which server model do you have? Away you go. You have to provide the SNMP community string as well. It's a very simple one, that one. So still on step 3, once again, this step is completely customizable except for the back and next buttons. This should be the step where you ask the user for all the information about what they want to configure. All the options, sub-options, drop-down lists, whatever you want. So before I can talk about step 4, or there's the additional to, this is a user coming from step 2? If so, you get that data like the IP address and present it in the fields. Or was a user on step 4 and they clicked the back button? If so, you need to repopulate all the information that they previously provided on step 3 so they don't have to type it in all again. Or there could be the possibility that the user provided data on step 3 was incorrect and you need to do validation checks, so you're being returned back to here. An example of that is you might tick an option, but there'll be multiple sub-options and you didn't select any of the sub-options. So you need to check against those sorts of things. Once again, if you don't configure it correctly or select the right options, the configuration wizard isn't going to be able to monitor the device properly and you'll get errors. So that was what I was talking. We have between step 3 and step 4, we have the validation stage. Very similar to what I was talking about before. If they click the back button from step 4, we don't need to validate the data because it already got validated when we went from step 3 to step 4. And then we need to do the reality checks on that data to make sure that everything is as it should be. So on step 4, you get the standard monitoring settings, how long, the retry intervals, those sorts of things. These can actually be hidden, and on the bottom image you can see that there's an example of where there are no monitoring settings. You might want to program these directly in your code. You might not want the user to provide any of these options. You might have your own thoughts on that, how you decide to do that monitoring. So between the step 3 and step 4, we have this stage called config wizard mode get stage 3 ops, and that's how you can turn on and off the hiding of those options. Refer to the code in the box 293 demonstration wizard. It explains it in there how you can just uncomment the lines and it will work straight away. So on step 4, you'll be asked how often you want to monitor the device. Any additional HTML that you put on this step will appear on the monitoring settings step, the notification settings step, and all of the groups step, and also the final step. And this step will always be titled monitoring settings. We have another validation stage. Generally, you don't need to put anything in here, but if you did ask for more options on step 4, then you need to check that the data is as what it needs to be. You know, you don't want illegal characters, those sorts of things. Step 5, you have the standard notification settings. On the left images, you can see that there are all of the groups and when the problem is detected. And on the right, you can see you can actually hide all of those. You can actually hide just bits of this one. So refer to this is, once again, there's a mode get stage 4 ops. An optional does not need to exist. Refer to the box 293 configuration wizard. It will explain how you can turn on and off each of the different options. I've just talked about all of that, so that's fine. We have step 6, which is the options for the groups and parents. You can't do anything here. It's always going to look like this, and it cannot be modified. This may change in future versions of XI, but right now, that's the way it is. We have the final step. You can add additional code to the screen. It will always be titled final settings. You can actually, a suggestion here is you could put a final summary of what you're going to monitor, all of the different services, the options the user chose, and it's just a good review. The apply button here and the finish button there, the finish button skips and just starts. So you might not want to go through all of these steps. You might want to accept all the defaults and just click finish at this stage. It's the same as going apply on the final step here. So using all the data you have gathered, you'll create an objects array, and you'll put in this objects array all of the host and service objects. There's some error checking you do there. You know, does the host exist already? Does the service exist? And if it doesn't, then formulate. It's very similar to the config files for a service definition. I won't actually go into how all that works, but you need to make sure that refer to the box 293 configuration wizard. It's explained cleanly in there. Be careful. If you didn't do your reality checks on the data, there's the possibility you'll get this error. And that error could be you left a field blank, you didn't have a valid notification option or a check setting or an invalid character, and the admin then has to go on to into the core configuration manager or have a look in the snapshot and then try and find out what's relevant. So there's a simple rule to this, and that's test, 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 and test again, and then when you think you've got it, do a little bit more testing. If you supply a plugin with the wizard, you can define the command that gets added to the back end. It's all done in a .cfg file, and it's referenced in the config.xml file. Something that I like to do, and I'd like you to take note of here, is to provide all of the arg variables on the command definition. Even if you only use the first 2 or 3, someone else might have a different way of using the same command. So give them the option of doing that. That lets them do what they want to do. It just, because otherwise I've come across this, and what I end up doing is I duplicate the command, so I have another command with more variables, and it just gets a bit excessive, you could say, or unnecessary to have multiple commands doing the same thing. Refer to the official documentation. It explains how all of this works and how you can, because you can also do other things like objects, like groups as well, adding in. This is a very simple command definition like you would normally see in Nagios. This takes us to components. I'll answer any questions about configuration wizards at the end. I've only created one component so far. It's called the History tab, and while I won't go on about this a lot, it's one of my favourite things I use. I use it every day because something gets triggered into a warning or a critical state. Go to the History tab and you can see what happened previously. Otherwise you've got to go back into the core interface to find this information, and it gets a little bit, it's just extra clicks you don't want to have to do. There is official documentation on component development. The reason why I won't talk about that today is because it's almost a topic upon itself. It's not just a tab. It can be, I can't show you here, but you can add another menu and another function to the whole interface section. The official documentation talks about that. Moving on to dashlets and dashboards. So dashboards are designed to provide a unique user experience, allowing them to configure a page with all the information they need on it. Each user can create their own dashboards, multiple dashboards, and this unique information is done by adding dashlets to the dashboards. Now these can be, they're unique to each user, but you can actually push out dashboards to users, and you can tick a box to make sure that these dashboards are kept synchronized with the master dashboard that you pushed out. So this is a dashboards tab. Let me just see. Yeah. So that's the dashboards tab. And by default, when you click the dashboards tab, you get your home page normally when you log in. So I've created 2 dashlets so far. The text dashlet is just that. It just allows you to add some text on the screen with some simple HTML formatting. I created the text dashlet as a way of understanding how dashlets worked. I had the idea for the status info dashlet in my head, but I was a little overwhelmed as how I would achieve this, so I went back to basics and learnt how it worked. As you can see, with the status info dashlet, you can take the service output of any service and display it in nicely formatted large text on a dashboard. You can put a lovely text name, you can use the host and object name, you can set the background color as the current state of the service. You can even remove text. You can see I removed the OK hyphen from the beginning of this one here. I also have another example. I'll just flick to here. This is an example of me using this at work. The ones on the left are individual text dashlets, And the ones on the right are service outputs from MGRT checks that tell me the status of all of our comms links. And you can see normally the state starts off with OK, so I've cut that off the top, and all I've got is in and out. And it's just a different way of getting this information on a screen that you can see. And I add this to views, because views rotate around and get updated. Currently with Dashlets, or with my Dashlets, they don't refresh. When you click on a dashboard, it gets the information and it stays stagnant until you click the dashboard again, and then it refreshes the data at that point in time. I do plan on fixing that. I just need to learn Ajax. We'll get there. I'll explain the basics. Oh, sorry, let me go back to that presentation. I'll explain the basics of how Dashlets work by using the text Dashlet, just because it's much simpler than the status info Dashlet. So there are 4 parts to a Dashlet, and I'll go through each one of these. The preview mode is what is displayed when you click the available Dashlets link. It contains all of the code for the summary and the little, if you've got a picture, it references the screenshot picture. This information will also appear on the Manage Dashlets link, where you can add and remove Dashlets. If you get sick of a Dashlet and you don't want it anymore, you can delete it. The Dashlet mode get config HTML. So when you click this little icon that says add this to a dashboard, the get config HTML is used. And this pops up a screen, and this is the example of the text Dashlet. So here you see that I've got the options for the text, like the size, the weight, the style, the variant, the color, and a field to type in the text. Also, you need to pick the dashboard that you want to add it to. One thing to take note of here is there's no error checking. If you didn't type text in the text field and click the Add It button, it just does it. And then you get a Dashlet on your dashboard that will be empty, and when you look at the HTTP logs, every time that dashboard's refreshed, it can't get the information because that variable doesn't exist. It hasn't been populated. So a way to get around that is to provide a preview tab. This is an example of the status info Dashlet I have, where I have error checking built in. When they select the options, they click the preview tab. If they haven't selected a required option, it will tell them on a pop-up, and reference. I have numbers. There's so many options. I reference them with numbers so they know where to go to find out. It's just a way of circumventing that error checking that doesn't exist. And also, with this one, it provides a preview of what it's going to look like. With Dashlets, once you add them to a dashboard, you can't change them. You can't change the options. If you want to change them, you delete the Dashlet and you go and add it again. The text Dashlet I will update to be very similar to this, and I'll have 2 variants of it, because the current state that it's in is quite simple and it's easy to understand if you just want to make your own. But also I like the fanciness of the preview function and that sort of stuff. You can see here too, I have a help tab and a license tab. These are the things, once again, trying to explain what it's all about and trying to put it in a central area that people don't have to go off somewhere else to look for information. The inboard, Dashlet mode inboard, this is the actual bit of code that makes the Dashlet appear on a dashboard. When the dashboard displays, it knows there's a Dashlet there, and it knows it goes and gets the information from the back-end databases, like, for instance, the text, check it out, and then it applies the different formatting styles to it, all the options I chose. The status info Dashlet does the exact same thing as this, but it's much more complex because I have a lot more options the user can choose for formatting the text and applying different things to the Dashlets. The outboard mode is for some Dashlets that are built into the pages of XI, like the server status and the host status summary. These ones, when you click the little add it to a dashboard icon, it adds it to your dashboard, and when that dashboard displays, it actually, all the code then is in the inboard section. It's just different ways of using or of making it work. In this example, in the status info dashlet, I don't need to have anything in outboard because I don't do anything with outboard. So you can leave that section empty. That is the end of my presentation. If you did want to get a 10% discount on Nagios XI, you can. There is a little referral code there if you purchase it through that URL. If with the new version of XI 2012, there is actually a new, a more enterprise version of the product. They are offering a half price, or don't quote me on this, but a discount to upgrade to the newer version. So you could actually get a discount now on the whole product, and then you'll get a discount for the upgrade for a limited time when they officially release the 2012 version. Any questions? I have some additional steps I thought I would show while we were waiting, if people didn't have questions. Some of the stuff I'm working on at the moment is a page file size. I'm a Windows guy, by the way. I'm not sure if you realize. So using a virtual environment, page files, there's this standard thing where they say you should use 1.5 times the amount of physical memory in the machine. Now, especially with 64-bit operating systems now, you can just add more memory. But you don't have that 4 gig limit. And because they're virtual machines, you don't have to physically go out and buy the memory and add it. So I'm creating a page file check that tells you what the page file usage is and also the statically defined size of the page file for auditing purposes. Another one I'm working on is called RDP Info. It's an example of, tells you the active, idle and disconnected sessions. We're a terminal services shop, so this is handy information for forward planning. You know, the customer. This is what I love about XI and Nagios, is the historical data. You know, I can reference this graph against the CPU usage graph and say, well, when there's 10 users connected, there's 80% CPU usage. So instantly I can then go, great, I can add another CPU and that should help with that. It also shows you the input-output bytes here. I will also, I'm not a live demo person, but I will dip my toe in the waters to show you some of what I was talking about before with the configuration wizards. So this is just a virtual machine running on my laptop. Hopefully it's working, or maybe it's decided to stop. I didn't pray to the demo gods, that's my problem. Here we go. Nah. The configure, I can run a monitoring wizard. If I show you, for instance, the host creation tool. Here are the expandable, collapsible divs. There's lots of information there, but you don't have to see it every time you run it. Once you know how to use it, you don't have to read them every time. You go through, you can choose the options. This is a way of adding a lot of hosts to Nagios without adding any services to them. You may want to add them to groups later and that sort of thing. It finds out what wizards are currently installed on there, and then does a, it will only show the wizards that it knows that is installed. There is a, I'm just trying to, here we go. This is an example of, if I select Linux server, and Linux server has got a little hash sign there that says, oh, it's required for the Linux server. And you've got to put the address and something and something. It's not really necessary here, but when I click next, bang, I didn't select a Linux server, a Linux distribution. So that's the error checking I was talking about. But you can see that when I go down, that Linux server is still selected, so I've populated that. I select the Linux distribution, and down here the user input is being repopulated. So the user doesn't have to go and type that information again or copy and paste it. I don't like having to repopulate my fields. It's one of those things. The dashboards, so available dashlets. I'll bring up the status info dashlet. So it gets a list of, let me see if I make this full screen to make it a bit easy to see. It's hard to see at this resolution, but it gets a list of all of the services on the host, and you can select one of them and click the preview tab, and that's what it'll look like by default. You can do whatever you want. You can turn off showing the current status underneath the object. It's not there anymore. Before it said current status is okay. You can turn off the color. There's no color anymore. You can change what's displayed. You can just have just the object if you want. Once again, you click the preview tab. It just shows you what it's going to look like as the final product. And you can do some remove characters from the beginning. I might try to use some custom text and remove HTTP from the front of it. And you can see here no longer, it just has OK. Before it said HTTP OK. And you can tell that if you go back to here, you can see that HTTP OK, HTTP blah, blah. So then you could reference it even further and put in, you can put OK there as well. And you'll see that it'll chop that out as well. Or no, if I typo? Ah, yes, I see. Bang. So now it's just got that HTTP there. And you have to select which dashboard you want to add it to, and then when you click the Add It button, away it goes, and back on the home page, there it is here. And you can, it's all covered up at the moment. You can move it around. It's just this resolution is a bit hard. There we go. And you can pin them up, you can resize them, etc., etc. And if you don't like it, just get rid of it. The only other one I could show you is the history tab, but I don't think I have any history. This is just a running machine. If I look here, there's the history tab. It just says there's no history. That's about it, really. Question?
Yeah, just wanted to confirm what Troy had said, that existing Nagios XI clients will get the enterprise features at half off. We're also going to have a free 60-day trial, so you'll be able to try all of that out if you'd like to and demo it and see what you think. Oh, and also Mike Guthrie, the lead developer at Nagios, is going to be hosting a Birds of the Feather session tonight at 7 o'clock in track 3. So if you have some in-depth technical questions, he can help you out with that.
I've had a play of RC 2012, and it's the enterprise features in particular. The one that I've just am in love with is the renaming tool. And you have, say, like anyone, they start adding stuff and it gets monitored for a couple of weeks, and they might use lowercase, and then everyone makes a decision that everything has to be uppercase. When you normally rename it, you lose all the performance data information because it doesn't rename the back end of all the config files. What the Enterprise Edition, it has a renaming tool. You rename a service or a host, and it will rename the back end RRD and XML files, and it just is like it has all the history there that you want, and it's really handy. I know I'll be upgrading to it because I did exactly that. And I had a lot of stuff that's in lowercase, but everyone decided no, it has to be in uppercase, so we have to go back, and it was quite, I was actually going to write something to do it, but thankfully I don't have to do that now. Any other questions at all? Well, that's about all I've got. Thank you very much for coming to my presentation.